We'll move on to our expert talk so you can meet our two speakers for the day. So this is really to give you a sense of who they are, what their background is, and maybe can start to get the juices flowing as to what kind of questions you'd like to be asking them. Um, so without further ado, I'm gonna speakers maybe give us a little wave when when I introduce you. We've got Nancy Wilson, who is the founder and CEO of Canadian Women's Chamber of Commerce, and then Barb Weeks, who is the CEO of the PEI Business Women's Association. So we'll get started with our oh, sorry, I need to move something here. We'll get started with our expert talk. So Barb, I'm going to pass it over to you first to kick us off.
Hello. I feel like there is so many experts in this room. I'm honored to be considered an expert amongst all of you. It's so great to hear all of the great work that you're all doing across Canada for women entrepreneurs, and I'm just so thrilled. I'm listening to all of you, and I have goosebumps actually, and I feel humbled to be here with you actually as an expert. I think all of you are experts in your own fields, and but I'll just give you a little bit of information on my background. So I was an entrepreneur for a number of years, probably about 12 years, early in my career. It came out of necessity, raising three small children. I'm sure lots of women have the same story. I started a home-based business to make some extra money, be home with my children. And it grew to a point that we were in over 60 stores here on PEI. We did jams and antipasto. And we had quite a great following across the island. Tourists would come and love to purchase our products while they were here. So I did that for about 12 years, and it was a great business. I loved it. And it just got to the point for myself that it wasn't serving what I wanted to do in my life. My kids had grown, and I was looking to branch out, as many entrepreneurs do, to do other things. I I went back to school and got my Master's of Business Administration, which was a process that I thoroughly recommend to anybody. The 2 years I did that was an amazing learning journey, learning from my fellow students in my cohort and the professors. It's different learning as an adult, having other experience, and you learn very quickly that there is so much that you don't know. So I welcome that journey for anyone. I totally recommend it. It was amazing. And then I went, and as people say around here, got a real job. I wasn't doing my business anymore after that, and I worked for actually one of our Chamber of Commerce's here, Nancy, for a couple of years, and I learned all I could through that. I also worked for a number of years at um, an economic development um, business. I was the executive director for Central Development Corporation, and we did most of the work that we did was we had three rental properties, commercial residential properties that I managed. We were low rent for entrepreneurs starting out. It wasn't specific just to women at that time. It was for any entrepreneur looking for a start. And so it was great working with the different entrepreneurs in so many different industries. And my last large project with them was we repurposed a 10,000 square foot building that was vacant in Borden, near the bridge here. And we repurposed it into a food hub. So two large processing federal inspected processing facilities, and three smaller areas where a small food processor could rent and do more for provincial regulated foods. And so we totally renovated that. That was quite an experience to work with the food experts and get it food grade ready for businesses. The largest tenant that was in that building was the hand pie company. I'm not sure. I know they have expanded and have their products in Sobeys across Canada now. So they were quite excited to move into a federally registered building so that they could export their food. So, and then after that, I moved. Now I'm the CEO for the PEI Business Women's Association. So we're a nonprofit. The development organization was nonprofit as well. And so now I get to work with women entrepreneurs. We have about 500 members locally here in our province. I know some of these numbers seem low compared to some of the people in larger provinces, but for us, it's a great. We have wonderful members. We have lots of women-owned businesses across the island. From small tea rooms to large international tech companies. You know, we have quite the varied industry representation through our membership. So we are a nonprofit. We offer programming, and we do a couple of grant rounds throughout the year that we get funding for, micro grants for small businesses. We do, we also are a member of WEOC now. We are a loan fund partner for WEOC. We're just kind of getting started with that process. So we do meet with clients and discuss their financing needs. As we all know, financial is usually the top of the list for everybody, entrepreneur, nonprofit. So we do a lot of work in that, and we're trying to get more of that involved and more involved with that for our members as well. So in a nutshell, that's my journey as an entrepreneur and a nonprofit yeah, leader.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Barb. And lots of little pieces that I definitely want to get into in the panel discussion. And I'm sure there are things as well that these learned as well. All right, now I'm trying to figure out how to unpin you. I was asked to pin you, so it was easier to see. But we will, there we go. So I'll move on to Nancy now for your expert talk.
Thank you. We may be interrupted by my cat because my partner has just left, and it is like a Shakespearean tragedy happening in her mind. So she's wailing, but I think I've calmed her down. Okay, so my name is Nancy Wilson. I'm the founder and CEO of the Canadian Women's Chamber of Commerce. And so I'll tell you a little bit about myself personally, and then I'll tell you about founding the Women's Chamber of Commerce and sort of what that was all about. So my original, well, first I'll say that I never really believed when people would talk about like how they felt like they were meant to be in a certain job, or they were, you know, fated to, or destiny led them to this point in their life or anything like that. I'd kind of roll my eyes, and I'm a pretty cynical, like glass half empty person. But when I started CanWCC, which is the short form that we use, like I really found that all of that was true. I really believe that all of these experiences that I had in my life, some of them positive, some of them negative, really combined to make this a perfect job for me. And what I usually say is, you know, my job, I get to complain all day long in my job, which is perfect for me. And, but when I look back, really, I do see, you know, what made me the person I am today and why I love my job. So when I was younger, you know, in middle school or whatever, elementary school, I was bullied quite a bit. And although it was hell, at that time, it really did build a lot of empathy in me. And that empathy led to a really different take on the world. My parents sent me to an all-girls high school, which, I hated them for at the time, but it was such a wonderful experience for me to have those formative years in a space that was all women. And it really built a strong feminist worldview that I had. Then, of course, I was dumped out into the real world. And I just thought, what the heck is going on out here, and it really shaped what I thought needed to be changed in the world. In my undergrad, I studied psychology and then went on to do a mental health degree and worked for a while in social services and thought that was going to be my future. But I was no good at setting those psychological boundaries, and I was taking home that emotional stuff, took it home with me at the end of the day. And so I burnt out very quickly. And then I kind of fell like ass backwards into accounting, which is very strange. But for me at the time, it was great to move from a burnout in social services to something that was very kind of balanced, cut and dried. And I really fell in love with accounting. So I've spent the majority of my adult career, I didn't have a career when I was a child, so let's just say the majority of my career pre-CanWCC in accounting, and I worked for almost a decade in various corporate roles with startups, mid-sized companies, and multinational corporations in these finance and accounting roles. And most people think accounting is all about numbers, and they're not wrong. But what we do in the accounting department is we categorize those numbers and allocate them in such a way that those numbers can tell a story. And the story is what happened with this business in the last year or whatever period that we're representing. And that also means that the accountants or the folks in the accounting department see everything, including all the dirty laundry. And so over the years, I've seen the expense reports from senior leaders, like really senior leaders, expense reports like claiming really ridiculous and outrageous things from like a sales trip to Vegas. And I've also seen legal bills for lots of mediation and settlements for sexual harassment and worse, right? So I left the corporate world in 2016 with some bumps and bruises, and I thought, I can't go back. And I started my own accounting and advisory firm, and I worked primarily and on purpose with women who were starting and growing their small businesses. And, the entrepreneurship world had its own challenges, as it does across all genders, but all of that systemic misogyny, all of that systemic racism was absolutely, alive and well in the entrepreneurship world as well. And I knew, I faced those challenges as a woman entrepreneur, but I saw all of that systemic misogyny and racism and ableism and all of those things happening with the clients that I was serving as well. So, my tolerance for BS was, very, very low, and my rage was simmering pretty high in 2017 when a colleague of mine or someone in my network told me that Canada didn't have a women's chamber of commerce. And I just assumed that Canada did because I knew that women's chambers of commerce existed in the US. I knew that they existed in countries across the world. And so I just assumed that Canada would. But it was true. Canada had no women's chamber of commerce. So I did what any good entrepreneur would, and I did some research, and I pulled all the policies from the Canadian Chamber of Commerce for the last 3 years. That was about 200 different policies that they had published and put forth publicly endorsing. And I started reading through them, looking to see like, well, maybe we don't have a women's chamber of commerce because, you know, women business owners are well represented by the Canadian chamber. And so I was reading through these policies, looking for those that, you know, represented the economic interests of women business owners, and I wasn't really seeing any. So I did just like a word find on like the PDF, like a Command F or whatever, and I looked for the word woman, women, or female. And out of the PDF of those 200 policies, I found only 3 instances of the word woman, women, or female across 200 policies. So that, to me, I mean, I realized like, so, you know, maybe we do need a women's chamber of commerce. And, you know, I'm not, at the time I was like, this is outrageous. And I still think it's outrageous. But I don't think it's necessarily a case of CanWCC doing any, or sorry, I don't think it's necessarily the Canadian Chamber of Commerce doing anything wrong. I think, you know, chambers of commerce are meant to advocate and represent on behalf of their members. And the Canadian Chamber of Commerce in those 200 policies are representing their members. And their members are primarily medium and large size businesses that are primarily owned and operated either through public market share ownership or by men. So the real issue is the gap in representation that that was happening at the time. So I founded the Canadian Women's Chamber of Commerce to fill that gap and to have an entity that the government would respond to, because the government understands what a chamber of commerce is and will consult with them regularly. And we needed someone, an advocacy agent, to represent women business owners. So that was 7 years ago. The last 7 years, you know, there's been a couple ups and downs like COVID and a variety of things. But it was also a very good time to start the Chamber of Commerce because of the political, because the politics were such that there was a fair amount of funding at play for women entrepreneurs and programming for women entrepreneurs. Right now, things are very different. And to be honest, I don't know what the future looks like. It's up in the air, and I think we need to wait and see what the budget looks like come the fall to really say anything decisive about what funding for nonprofits, especially nonprofits that work with women, will look like. But we can see what's happening in the United States. And what happens in the United States, a lot of that is, you know, bleeds into what's going on in Canada. And I think what our proximity to the US in my opinion, this is not CanWCC, this is Nancy Wilson. In my opinion, our proximity to the US blinds people, a lot of people, to what is happening in Canada, because we can rest on this idea that, well, we're not as bad as the US, so things are okay. So I'll end by encouraging everybody to encouraging them to challenge themselves, and especially challenge everyone they talk to say it doesn't matter what's happening in other countries, and it certainly doesn't matter what's happening in the US. We need to look at what Canada has done yesterday and say, are we better than what Canada did yesterday? Because that's the bar we should be measuring ourselves against. And if we're not doing better than Canada yesterday, then we are not fulfilling the advancement of, you know, the inclusive economy or inclusive innovation that the government loves to throw out as buzzwords. And to be honest, comparing ourselves to what's going on in the United States is such a desperately, like, critically low bar that for anyone to say, well, we're not as bad as the US, that's chilling to me, you know? Because if we're just a bit better than the US, we are in crisis. And a lot can be done under the guise of an economic crisis, and a lot is being done under the guise of an economic crisis. Things can be done quickly and without a lot of consent, and the landscape is changed dramatically before you even know it. So again, that's political talk from Nancy Wilson, not from CanWCC, but I'll put it out there because I know the audience here. When you work in not-for-profit and charities, your future is tied to politics. So that's me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Nancy. A lot of food for thought for sure. I saw some like nodding heads there as you were going through. So thank you so much for being so candid as well, because I think these conversations work best when we are informal and candid with each other. So thank you so much for taking us through your journey and your mission really at CanWCC. All right, so I'm going to open it up to our panel discussion. As I mentioned, we have questions drafted for our speakers, but I want to check, is there any questions in the audience right now that's at the tip of your tongue and you'd like to ask our speakers? And I'll remind you, you can use the raise hand function, ask on camera, or you can do it by asking the chat and I can ask on your behalf. Winnie, yes, please go ahead.
I just saw so many amazing women here to support each other in the nonprofit space, and I'm hoping to connecting with many of you because our organization actually supporting all the entrepreneurs. Right now we have 1,800 members. We need a lots of mentors and advisors and anybody who can help them in any way they can start a business. 80% of them, they're newcomers to Canada, and they're professionals back home and or business owners back in their own country. So they're all skilled immigrant or newcomers. And also we have 40% under 30 years old. Majority is university graduate or, you know, master degree graduate. And I need a lots of Canadians like us to support them and help them. So hope all of you can connect with us, which is the v2rf.org. Vision to Reality Foundation. And I needed to connect with everyone, so I'm not sure the host able to send us some information so we can all support each other. Thank you.
Wonderful. No worries, Wendy. Yeah. So you should be able to, please add all of your information into the chat. You should be able to save the chat as well. If there's any difficulties, let us know. And Miriam, my colleague, will be able to help you. Well, if there's no questions that are popping into your brain, maybe I'll ask of you to warm everyone up. I did hear when we were going through the introductions, there was quite a few people who are in the midst of starting out their nonprofit or they're kind of in those early stages. So Nancy and Barb, um, is there like one piece of advice of something that you wish you had known before entering this space that you would have liked some guidance on before starting your journey? Barb, maybe I can ask you first.
Sure. Well, I mean, the nonprofit sector, I mean, I went from being an entrepreneur to working in nonprofit. So I didn't have any for-profit outside work, I guess, in between that. So I do find for myself funding, right? Like I mean, that's the biggest, like I said earlier, financial is the biggest stumbling blocks for a lot of people, and nonprofits are no exception. Um, Now, there's so many avenues out there to receive funding, and the biggest, I think, learning curve I had when I came into the nonprofit sector is to learn and find out as much information as I can about what funding opportunities are out there, what funding cycles different provincial or federal organizations have, because they're very particular, and just learning everything that I could for what the requirements were for a good proposal, because again, they're all different. And a lot of the ones have moved to online applications, which is another. So sometimes it was hard to find the actual full application so you could work on it before you actually went to submit it. So research and a lot of research and learning, I think, goes into that. Any nonprofit, as many of you know, to just find the best funding avenues for your particular organization and diversify your funding. That's so important. Don't just have one funding stream, because when it's gone, it's gone. And, I've actually was in a conference not that long ago that I had quite a few colleagues that had to, let people go because the particular project that they had, it was very specific funding. They might have had 4 or 5 staff under that funding. The government decided to stop it. And they don't give you any notice. Unfortunately, you've all, I'm sure, experienced this. So then all of a sudden you're like, okay, I can't do this program and I have to let go all of these people. And it's a horrible feeling. So diversify. We're facing a little bit of that here on PEI right now, again, with the federal, federal budget where it's at, or we don't know where it's at right now, as Nancy alluded to. I'm every day I'm looking for different funding streams to get projects done for our entrepreneurs here on PEI. And that's one of the biggest challenges, I think, to always keep on top of what's out there, where you can get funding, writing those proposals, sending them in, and but just to always be aware of what's happening in the ecosystem in your area. So that would be, I guess, my biggest stumbling block coming to nonprofit.
Thank you, Barb. And you mentioned funding, and if there's anyone I'm wondering if we'll talk about it. Yes, we'll definitely get into different avenues and how to best choose the right avenue and diversification and all of that for sure. Nancy, how about yourself with, your various different backgrounds? What was something maybe that took you by surprise? You were like, "Ooh, really wish I knew about this."
Um, so I think that for those people, this is just a piece of advice. It doesn't really relate to CanWCC, but knowing what I know now, for those of you who haven't actually registered or started your nonprofit or charity, I would encourage you to sit back and think about whether a not-for-profit slash or charity or for-profit is the right way to go, because choosing the entity is going to determine in large part, what revenue generating activities you're going to be able to engage in, how much reporting and regulations you're subject to, and if you choose for profit, you can still have a social enterprise and contribute to the cause that you are passionate about, and connect that cause to what you're doing. The difference between not-for-profit and for-profit is really around what revenue generating activities that you can. So the legislation around not-for-profit restricts the revenue generating activities that you can do, and it allows you to not pay tax on the revenue that the entity generates. Charities, you need approval from the Canadian government to actually form a charity, and the type of activities that the charity engages in is much more restricted. So, and you're subject to much more regulations and reporting. So it's even narrower. But for-profits can engage in any kind of revenue generating activities as long as they're legal, but they do have to pay tax on that revenue. So talking to an accountant, I'm biased of course, talking to an accountant, talking to a lawyer, looking at what you want to do and how you want to do it going forward, and what entity is the best vehicle to achieve what you want.
Excellent advice. Thank you so much, Nancy. And yeah, I think that's so important to think about before you maybe get started in anything else. I feel like that should be the first step to it. We did have a comment in the chat from someone called Nick, and they are really looking for like any sort of resource that they should be aware of when they're first starting out their nonprofit. So they're really in those early stages. So if there is, Barb, Nancy, if there's any other sort of tips you have in starting out, I also pose that to the rest of the room as well. If there are any resources that you'd like to share with Nick or anyone else, please do put them into the chat. But Barb and Nancy, any resources that maybe you could point someone towards if they are really wanting to start their nonprofit business?
If they're looking to incorporate a nonprofit federally across the country, if you visit Corporations Canada, they have a very good step-by-step introduction to how to incorporate your not-for-profit. You can incorporate it online on the Corporations Canada website. It costs you some money, but not a lot. They have a bylaw builder on that website. Again, depending on what you want to do with your not-for-profit, you may want to use the bylaw builder or see a lawyer about constructing more specific and complex bylaws. But that's what I did. I went to Corporations Canada and I incorporated the chamber on the website.
Thank you so much, Nancy.
Yes, I was just gonna add just everything that Nancy said, and actually not having registered a nonprofit myself, I came into them already established. Writing bylaws can be so daunting, and so the bylaw builder would be a great start. But also, if you have the funds, hiring a lawyer to do them properly, I think is worth their weight and worth the money that you would spend on it. We've had to redraft our bylaws here recently, and we are looking to maybe change our status to charitable status. So, you know, you really want to make sure that you have the correct information from a trusted source before you actually embark on that, like Nancy said earlier. So honestly, I mean, CRA, Corporations Canada, your provincial body, if you're just going to incorporate provincially, I mean, all of that information, those are good resources and good websites to go to find information before you make the decisions. And then once you make the decisions, please, like, consult an expert, a lawyer, an accountant, to get, you know, even to have an initial consultation with them to get the best legal or financial advice that you can. I think that's really worth it.
Brilliant. Thank you both. We have another question from Kamal Jeet, who's asking, as someone exploring how to support nonprofits with social media, what's one overlooked tip you have for telling stories that resonate? And I think that would kind of tie into, you know, if there's, you know, for the founders here of nonprofits, what type of storytelling can they leverage in their marketing to showcase the impact, I suppose, that they're having. Nancy, maybe?
I'll just say one thing, sorry, on that. Sorry, if you want to go, Nancy, too. Just, I find be real, you know, just be real and make your stories real and engaging, and take the time to really get to the heart of what you're discussing or whatever cause you have, and have people that really believe in it to put that information out there, to tell your story. And whether you're hiring consultants to do the work for you, videographers, photographers, they really need to feel that that purpose that you have as well. And then everything coming out of them will be believable on the other end. So that's just one tip. I'm sure lots of people have other tips, and Nancy, I'm sure you have some tips on that as well.
Yeah, I'm an accountant. I'm not a marketing person, but the best tip I've received from the marketing people that have worked with the chamber is that people don't connect with brands, they connect with people. So a lot of the time when I would rather have not been the spokesperson or not been, you know, the person quoted, they have argued that people need to connect with me, at least in the beginning. Potential members need to connect with me, or, you know, maybe even another staff member, as opposed to just this nebulous brand that is CanWCC. And, you know, that makes sense to me as a person. So once you start making impact, you can tell the story of how your beneficiaries received that impact, or you know, it will be easier as you grow as an organization to tell those stories. But of course, you want to be cognizant of reputational risk and the potential to exploit vulnerable populations when you bring beneficiaries into it. Depending on who those beneficiaries are, you want to make sure that people are paid for their time and effort, and you're not, you know, privacy is front of mind, because putting people out there on social media can bring unwanted attention. I'll say that.
Thank you, Nancy. And I'll add, you know, like Startup Canada, we're a nonprofit as well, and we collect quite a lot of data from our participants. You know, you all registered for this, and so you probably all went through the registration page, and that's really for us to have the best understanding of who is participating in our programs, and you know, that sort of the questions that we're asking. It helps to inform our programming. so we can ensure that we're best serving the community that is showing up for us. But then also for storytelling purposes as well, and for us going to you know, our partners to really kind of be able to back up what our mission is with that like hard data as well, I think is really useful as well. So yes, once you start making that impact and you can, you know, kind of show the numbers as well of the impact that you're having, I think um is gosh, I can't even think of the word, but it's impactful, it's useful, and it's kind of, you know, putting the money where your mouth is, like, I guess, as well. Okay, we've got a few attendees with hands up. I didn't see who went first, so I'm gonna do Les Passerelles Global first. If you'd like to ask your question.
Yes, thank you for giving me the opportunity. We just heard the example of a profit having a piggyback with a nonprofit. Can a nonprofit have a section which is commercial, meaning making some funds in order to sustain the financial growth of the nonprofit?
Great question.
So a not-for-profit can engage in revenue generating activities, but they have to be relatively narrow in scope and incidental. So the main ways that a not-for-profit would internally generate revenue would be through event ticket fees, you know, if they charge fees for the programming, membership fees, if that's the type of structure that they have. So CanWCC charges fees. We have a paid membership stream. We may have events that we charge tickets to. You can sell branded merchandise. That's considered incidental to raise some money. But if a big percentage of your revenue comes from selling product or service to the public, then eventually the CRA is going to question, like, are you really acting like a nonprofit? Because they are going to want to see tax revenue on that type of activity, because that's the type of revenue generating activity a for-profit engages in. So what you may want to do is, if you already have a nonprofit, you can create a separate for-profit, and anyways, talk to an accountant or someone else. There are ways that you can get around this, not illegally, and it's no trick. It's just there are ways that you can work with an accountant to have the best of both worlds, I'll say.
Thank you. I have a second part. I'm from Quebec, and it is very difficult to find accountants who work with nonprofits. I don't know if that's general to everyone or if it's specific to us, but do you have any little tips about finding someone who does for nonprofit accounting, not bookkeeping?
Yeah. It is tricky, and there are different rules for accounting and bookkeeping for nonprofits. I don't have any tricks. You just really have to search for someone who has that experience, because if you use someone who does not use the specific rules, you're going to run into trouble.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Great questions. Winnie, what's your question?
I just want to thank you for both the speakers to share those storytelling. And from our foundation's personal experience, it's true. Just like the founders, when you start a nonprofit, you just share your personal story, why you're passionate about it. That's exactly last 3.5 years how we did all our social media. We basically just share our personal story as an immigrant to Canada, how we built our business, how becoming a part of the Canadian, how proud we are, and why those knowledges will benefit all our audience. That's why we draw the 1,800 members in our organization. Just wanted to share with other new nonprofit owners. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Winnie, for sharing. Melissa, you have your hand up.
Yes. Hi everyone. Thank you so much for the session. So I'm joining in from Vancouver, and my question is, I'm in the process of launching a nonprofit. However, it's a bit different because the impact I'm hoping to have is for individuals in Kenya. So the nonprofit is Canada-based, but also there'll be an opportunity for us to bridge with the community back home in Kenya. I'm originally from Kenya. And I'm wondering if anyone has had any experience in terms of seeking international funding, just because I've been trying to find grants, but most of them are they're very niche specific. So I'm wondering if anyone has had any experience with that, or if you have suggestions in terms of how does one navigate having a nonprofit being located in a particular location, in this case, Vancouver, but still being able to have that impact specifically for the community I want to support, which would be individuals on the autism spectrum back home in Kenya. Thank you.
Great question, Melissa. Nancy, Barb, do you have any advice on seeking international funding?
I don't. Yeah, not an avenue that I work in myself. I'm sure there are people on this call. Like I said at the start, there are more experts in this room than just Nancy and I. So I'm sure there are other people that would like to comment on that would have great info for this person.
Sure. If there
I
is,
would like to answer, if you don't mind. I can speak. I don't know how to unmute myself.
no, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Yes, please. I want to anxiously answer her because to Melissa, because I am in a similar situation. I don't know if you can hear me.
We can hear you.
Yes. We are in Le Passerelle Global is in Canada and is in Ghana. Right now, what we have had faced the same problem, but what we're doing is applying through the CRA for a charity number. I found out from another NGO who works in Guatemala that you can apply from Canada, but you need to have all your proof. It's very important that you have a lot of good documentation. We have not completed our documentation for sending in, but that is the process. I know it is very difficult to find funding, especially for the African continent. Racism, excuse me, but I have to say it, plays a great part in whether or not we get funding from Canada to whichever part in Africa. But apply for a charity number is one of the first ways, and that may open the door to other ways.
Thank you so much. And is it possible to connect with you directly?
Yes, I'll put my information is in the chat, Le Passerelle Global Bridges, and you may, or if you would like it again, I can give it to you. But
Please.
I would love to connect with you because we are on the similar mission. Ours is education, and yours is some other charity. But it's,
Thank you so much.
Fantastic. I love to see one attendee supporting another. That's brilliant. Thank you so much. I know we have someone else's hand up. We have a few attendee questions that came in through the chat, so I want to make sure we're also getting to those. So Ramona has asked about your experience, if any, in partnering with researchers as collaborators as secondary funding or in development of your strategy. So do you have any advice? Just make sure I'm reading that correctly. What has been your experience, if any, partnering with researchers as collaborators as a secondary funding and development strategy, innovation grants that require support? Barb, Nancy, any experience? Mm-hmm.
I mean, we technically, we haven't hired researchers per se. I have contacts at the university, and we've talked about doing some funding research projects, but nothing has really, we haven't started anything yet. I mean, we received project funding and hire consultants. So they'd be subject matter experts, not necessarily researchers, depending if we're doing strategy or rebranding or website development or things like that. Nancy, do you have any other information?
So I know that there's specific grants that I just can't bring to mind what they're called, but they're specific grants for research done by academics, essentially, and not-for-profits can collaborate on that or partner with that. I've looked at those over the years, but I've never actually engaged in it, partly because I try to do like a return on investment decision when I look at how much time it's going to take to kind of organize that grant, negotiate the partnership, the collaboration, and what the ultimate result will be, plus some kind of probability in the middle of, will we actually get this grant? It's a very rough estimation, but that type of grant looks very unlikely for us to actually get. So I know it's there, depending on what your not-for-profit mission is. If the research is going to really further that mission, I would say go for it. But yeah, I just don't know enough about how that grant is administered to give you too much information on it.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I mean, research can be very expensive. I know that at the university here on PEI, I know that there are times where the university students they need to conduct research projects as requirements for their degrees, right? I had to do that. And there are times that you can work with local businesses or nonprofits on that research. So if you're familiar, if there's university in your area and you're familiar with, it can't hurt to have a conversation, especially if they have a particular learning stream that would cover the nonprofit and the work that you want to do. There could be a student researcher that would love to open up and do some research in a field that you're working in. So it can't hurt to talk to somebody at the university in a particular field. And then you're quite lucky you could get the research done for nothing. But you have to align your mission and what you're looking to find. But yeah, I mean, I've never looked into grants specifically for research. I know I have other women's organizations across Canada that we are looking to embark on some collaborative research across Canada, because it is very expensive to do that research. But lucky and work with your local university. You never know.
And sorry to interrupt. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Because I used to be a researcher, it's actually I'm finding it easier to look at it from that perspective of like the grants that I was able to get as a researcher and ways in which I was able to partner with community organizations. So now I'm on the other side and I'm looking at all these other grants and they're structured so differently. And I like for example, like last year I brought in 300,000, and if you don't know how the researchers can take advantage of these organizations to propel their own careers, if you don't have that knowledge and you're not coming to the table as an equal partner, there is a risk there. But I think if you're coming to the table like as an equal partner, creating agreements with those researchers, then there's lots of ways in which resources can flow to your organization. And that could be human resources, that could be actual funds, they could be creating innovations for your organization, things like that. It's just, I think it's a knowledge thing. So I guess I have to learn the other side of it, like these other grants. I'll have to work on that.
but you have the unique experience that you know both sides of it, or you're learning both sides of it. So that's a great perspective to have. But you're right. I mean, any agreement like that, you need to have a good contract in place. You know, because you don't want to have this research and use your funding to get this research done, and then, for instance, the university would take ownership of any research that's done with their students or their faculty, right? They would own that intellectual property. So you have to be very careful on that side of things too.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. All right, we've got 3 people with their hands up, and we've got around 8 minutes left. So I'm going to go to Kojenwa first for your question.
Oh yeah, thanks so much, and very cool call. Thanks for putting that together. I've been in PR and marketing, branding for a really long time. We've worked with a lot of companies with regard to setting up your nonprofit. It is like you're not disallowed to set up a for-profit that operates hand in hand with your nonprofit. So there was one company, Fashion Week Brooklyn, that has it. That's their for-profit branch. And then they've got the nonprofit branch, which is the BK Style Foundation, which delivers classes for sewing and things of that nature. So sometimes your for-profit can work in tandem. And you do need to know the rules. Canada's really, really rigid about the rules. So as long as you know those things, you can apply that when you are filing for taxes. And we're happy to share if anyone needs support on just how to prepare your story, or the tools that we have available now to create your commercials, which we can do at a fraction of the cost now. Please hit me up. I'm available for free calls at any time. I'll drop my Calendly. And then lastly, we do have a grant writer on our team. His rates are excellent. I've been working with him for the past 40 days, and we're well on our way to securing the funds that we need through RFPs. Believe it or not, the Canadian government is always looking for people who can supply information to them. So that's one methodology for securing capital. But yeah, I'll share my links. Anything, skip grants. There are grants available. There's lots and lots available. So yeah, just hang in there. It's tough, but hang in there.
Thank you so much for sharing. Appreciate it. Amanda, do you have a question?
Yes, I have 3 questions, but I'm hoping we can like cut them. I'll start with my most important. So the first was, and this is kind of to the 2, but also to the whole room, is like, have you found any go-to strategies or like frameworks for managing your budget when it changes from year to year? So for our nonprofit, we definitely know who we need to be working with and like applying for those grants, but sometimes we don't get it from year to year. So it's kind of like with just this massively like fluctuating budget that can go like be between $50,000, $100,000 that you suddenly don't have. I'm just trying to work with the like owners and figure out sort of a strategy on how we can be like, okay, we are still able to do a lot with a budget that we can't actually plan out a year or 2 ahead of time.
It makes programming really a challenge. I get
Yeah.
it. And so I've been with People now for just about a year and a half now. We had funding challenges from when I started. And, you know, we had a lot of ground to make up and a lot of relationships to rebuild when I came on board here. And, you know, and still this past year, like so our funding from last year was extended because luckily we had a little extra money that we hadn't spent, and there was an election, so everything stands still. So, you know, I was able to extend what I was given until the end of June. I still don't have a contract right now for this funding year, but you're right. I had to totally change the budget to an 8-month budget, and you know, so it's always a challenge. And I honestly have not found a tip, because you'd like to plan your project, your programming and your staffing 2 or 3 years out, but your funding cycles don't allow that. And I agree with you, Amanda. If anybody has tips that they've used to make that easier, because you think you have it all set, and then bam, election is called, and you have to put everything on hold, or you know, a funding that you think was going to be more long term, they end up closing it. So it is a challenge, and I will open up the floor. I mean, Nancy or somebody else might have some information, but I think it's just the nature of the beast, honestly.
Mhm.
Yeah. So one of the things that we've done is move to project-based accounting. So even on our chart of accounts, we have separate expense accounts for grant expenses versus so-called regular expenses, so that the budget, when we do a budget, we separate out what I would consider core operational costs versus programming costs. And that gives us an idea, at least we can ensure that we have the funds somehow. Usually for us, it's from, membership fees or some kind of other internally generated revenue to cover our core operational costs. So, to pay our QuickBooks Online subscription fees and other, key infrastructure costs. HR, it kind of bridges both of those. So, a portion of my salary would be operations, and a portion would be attributed to the grants based on some kind of, quick and dirty estimation of how much time I spend on each of those grant projects. That's sort of how we do the budget. And then at least we can look at variances from month to month or quarter to quarter on how we're doing on operational costs. And then we look at sort of expenses against revenue, grant revenue received on each project or each program, so that there's no overages. It's incredibly it's insanely complicated, and I spend so much of my, because I do the books and the financial reporting, I spend so much of my time reporting on grants that if I actually accounted for the hours on the grant expenses, it would be another probably maybe a full-time job on each of those grants that we don't claim. But every time I complain about it, I feel like, what am I saying? Like, we got the grant. How can I be complaining about this? Because there's so many other organizations that didn't even get the grant. So, but grants, like grant reporting, is the worst. It is the worst. And I'm privileged to complain about it.
Thank you.
Excellent question, Amanda. And I'll Startup Canada's perspective, like we rely for the most part on corporate sponsorship. So it's just a completely different avenue that we've gone down. And with that, we do a lot of like multi-year contract partners, so that we can give ourselves that runway of a few years of planning out our budget. So if it is primarily government grants, it is a lot more tricky with budgeting, but fantastic advice from Nancy and Barb. I know you have follow-up questions. I do see that Melissa has their hand up, so maybe I'll go to Melissa first, and that may be our time. We might have to go straight into our networking rooms, but you can bring those questions as well.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Amanda. Melissa, what's your question?
Thank you. So my question is actually very similar to Tiara's question in the chat. It's a question around finances. So aside from applying for grants, I know that other ways that people might potentially seek funds is through donations, like on their websites, or potentially through like a GoFundMe page. Has can anyone maybe provide a bit of insight in terms of, so for example, if you have a donation link on your website, are there things you should have in mind when seeking funding? Is that something that you can potentially like post on your LinkedIn page and ask folks who are interested if they would want to contribute, that they can just like use the donation link? And then I guess the other question is, do you need to have a business account set up so that people are able to send in their donations, or is this something that can be done through like personal accounts? This is for someone who's just about to start a nonprofit.
With regard to asking for donations, it's completely legal. It's viable. We have companies that do that all the time. I would suggest that you tell a great story. I am going to put in a link, a new resource that I found where you can literally create your story like with a few prompts. That's where we're living now. Like AI can do this in a few minutes. And people just want to know, well, how does it benefit them? So just always keep the end user in mind. Like, what do they need to feel content and happy about delivering that energetic exchange called money? What do they get?
Yeah. If you are a registered charity, then one of the benefits of that is that you can issue tax receipts for for any kind of donation. And that means that you can actually fundraise on a much larger scale and go after large donations as part of your fundraising strategy, because certainly corporations or people making large donations are unlikely to do so unless they receive a tax donation. Certainly their accountants would advise them not to donate unless they get a tax receipt. Maybe they would anyways, but it's certainly legal for a for-profit and a not-for-profit to receive public donations without issuing a tax receipt. Most people in the public expect to receive a tax receipt when they make a donation. They don't necessarily know the distinction between a charity and a not-for-profit. So I would make sure that if you have a donation button or link set up on your website or your LinkedIn, that you just include some language to make it clear to the person that you're a not-for-profit versus a charity, and you appreciate the funds. You specify what the funds are going towards, so you're transparent about that, and that your organization will not or cannot issue a tax receipt because it is not a registered charity, it is a not-for-profit. Some kind of language like that, because if people make a donation and then find out after the fact there's no tax receipt, then you just have angry people, and you just want as much goodwill as possible so that donors will then pass on the info to like-minded people, and you'll get more donors.
Makes sense. Thank you so much, Nancy.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that question, Melissa. And we are at time for our questions, but we're going to go into our networking breakout rooms now. So we do have them ready. You'll have about 3 to 4 people, or there'll be 3 to 4 people total in the room. We are going to be putting our speakers into these rooms as well. It's really for you to connect with each other, be quite intentional with it. Obviously, you're all working within a similar space, so use this as a time to broaden your network. There's any questions that you didn't get to ask or feel more comfortable asking in smaller groups, this is definitely the place to do that.